The once productive and profitable sheep industry in Western Queensland is in trouble. Drought has played a part, but the real finger of blame is being pointed at wild dogs. Sheep producers say their future depends on a bold and ambitious fencing plan, as Tony Eastley reports.
John Chandler has given up sheep grazing on his property at Blackall in Western Queensland because of wild dog attacks.
We've tried everything, and we've baited heavily, and we've cajoled our neighbours, and we've had arguments with people, and we've paid trappers, and we've, done everything you can do.
To the north, David Council is out inspecting his new fence. He's worrying about whether his sheep are safe from the wild dogs that have caused such havoc with farmers and the wider community.
Muddaborough had 6 shearing teams in it, it's just up the road. They might have 1 shearer left in Muddaborough, and that's the story on all our little country towns.
On Andrew Martin's farm at Tambo to the south, Guardian donkeys are on watch.
Someone's got to be the test dummy, and I guess it's a matter of how hungry or desperate you are as to what you try and do to allay the threat.
And Dominic Burton, outside Longreach, has taken the difficult decision to totally de-stock his property.
In the last 2 years, the dog population has expanded rapidly, not only out of their traditional operating range, but across, starting to encroach into the open downs where traditionally they didn't operate.
In Western Queensland, sheep, especially newborn lambs like this, are at increasing risk from wild dog attack. Farmers say sheep will simply disappear from here altogether unless significant action is taken. Graziers agree that what they've been doing isn't enough. Fences, they say, are the answer. It's just a matter of what sort of fence, where it's built, and who pays for it.
Those people wanting to remain in sheep have come to the conclusion that they're going to have to put up some sort of physical barrier, which is why they've gone back to the idea of fencing.
These vast rangelands have had sheep on them since the 1860s. Wool's prosperity peaked in the 1950s, but changing fashions 2 decades on saw prices drop, and when the floor price plan was dumped 2 decades on, the industry took a big hit. Now, with the wild dog menace, the state's flock is a tenth of the size, around 2 million. The damage to the industry has had serious economic and social consequences. Blackall prided itself as the sheep capital of Queensland, but the population of the district has declined by more than a quarter since the late 1980s. School numbers have almost halved. Businesses are closing.
We lost 10,000 sheep to dogs over the period that we were in sheep, from 1998 to 2011.
It's a long time since John Chandler's yards carried any sheep. Like many other farmers, he's switched to cattle.
Joss, my wife, we made a decision one day that we couldn't put up with that any longer, so we sold them. It is heartbreaking to see the devastation in a flock from dogs, and most people who haven't experienced wouldn't understand that you can't sleep easily at night knowing the dogs are out there, because they work at night and they're ripping into your sheep, and we were losing up to 2,000 adult sheep a year.
Andrew Martin has baited, trapped and shot wild dogs. His property at Tambo is in one of the worst dog-affected areas.
99% of the dogs caught anywhere in Queensland are not dingoes. They're all wild dogs. The new dingo, if you like, the wild dog, now breeds twice a year. They have litters of 6, whereas the old dingo was only breeding once a year and maybe having a litter of 2. They're having litters of 6 twice a year. it stands to reason that half of those combined litters are females. So for each bitch, there's 6 females ready to breed next year. So if in an area you've got 100 females, by the end of next year you've got 600 ready to breed. So you tell me how many dogs are out there.
In frustration, Andrew Martin turned to old methods of flock protection. First there were alpacas, but they, like the European shepherd dogs, the Marimars, were hard to care for. He then turned to using wild donkeys from the dry interior of the top end. But it still wasn't enough. He followed up by putting in electronic alarms at access points to the farm. If he identifies a wild dog, he goes after it with his rifle.
At the moment, we're up to about 1,400 dogs in our shire have been taken as bounties in the last 6 months.
David Council, whose farm, Dunblane, is near Barcaldine, considers himself lucky. He's still running sheep, but he knows the dogs are nearby.
There's massive numbers of dogs. There's 8,000 dogs have been taken between the Barkey Regional Council, the Murwire and the Blackall Regional Councils. That stretch of land there, which is up against the Great Dividing Range, 8,000 dogs taken in a year, and that's every year, that sort of take on dogs, and that's just scalps.
All 4 graziers are at the end of their tether over what to do about the menace of wild dogs. They mightn't agree on everything, but to a man they say fences are the answer. For a century, a dog-proof fence stretching from Queensland to South Australia has separated the dingoes in Northern Australia from the sheep districts in Australia's southeast. But changing land practices, poor management and absentee landholders have seen an increase in dog numbers.
We've all been through the community coordinated baiting programs. We have a lot of skill in our district at trapping dogs. We all carry rifles in our cars. When we see them, we shoot them. We do all sorts of things to try and trick these dogs up, and the insidious nature of them continuing to disperse from where they're quite thick in numbers, and turning up in our part of the world is such that the only solution are these fences here.
What's so different about this fence compared to the ones that we've seen for so many years?
1, they can't get through it. 2, it's got a footer on it. They do stop dogs, and 5 years ago, no one had fences up, and now fences are popping up everywhere around this part of Australia, and the people that are building the fences are reporting great success.
But there are complications. Some farmers can't afford it, and there have been arguments over what type of fence to use, whether it surrounds individual properties or entire shires. One proposal involved a fence 800 kilometres long.
There isn't enough time and money at the moment to get that whole of Western Queensland fence, which is what some people would like to do. What we need to look at is a staged process, and I think that was where we got to.
Some councils wanted to fence their whole council area. There was another committee that wanted to fence in 20 million acres, and there are others that wanted cluster fencing, as you've seen today.
But there are positive signs.
For more recent past, I guess the message from both federal and state governments was that the 2 camps need to come together and talk about an effective outcome that they agreed upon, and I think we're there now. The model that was agreed to would consist of cluster fences, so looking at trying to fund as many large multiple property groups as possible, and then using what we call linear or straight fences along boundaries in places to try and link those up, and then to try and create that larger enclosed area over time.
On his property, Maxland, close to Longreach, Dominic Burden, who favours shire-based fencing, says it's been an exhaustive, frustrating process, but he's on board and he's hopeful.
We're now at the point where we have a combined plan that allows for fencing on various scales, and I think that plan really recognises the nature of the problem across the district, and allows people to respond appropriately.
Down the highway on David Council's property, contractors are already putting in the posts to carry new high tensile steel mesh that will join up with his neighbours' boundaries. There's no guarantee, of course, that these fences are going to work, but for the producers, it's the best bet they've got of staying in the wool game. Some producers, of course, have already left, but for those putting out the big bucks for these fences, this is the last roll of the dice.
Unless I jump on the fence and put them up, I probably wouldn't be in sheep in 3 or 4 years' time. There's 3 types of wool producers: those that have never been on the front line, those that are on the front line, such as myself at the moment, and those that have been on the front line and lost the battle. And so they're no longer in, and so you don't meet those people anymore because they're now at bull sales and at cattle sales.
Andrew Martin, who has tried more anti-dog devices than most, agrees about the need to fence in partnership with neighbours.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the crowning glory to guardian animals. I will reduce my donkey numbers dramatically, and I'll just have 1 or 2 donkeys in each paddock in case there's an incursion, whereas I was having 20 and 30 donkeys in each paddock to keep pace with the predation and the invasion of wild dogs. The fence will allow us, in essence, to control total grazing pressure to within an inch, if you like.
Is there a problem, though, with the big fence that you and your other farmers around here have put together, that you're actually keeping the dogs out, but you're also keeping a lot of the fauna out, and you're breaking up what would be sort of natural habitat corridors?
And that's an excellent question, and the answer to it is pretty simple. We're actually creating a corridor within the area for the more vulnerable animals, like the little potoroos and the paddy melons and the goannas and the koalas and all the other little fellas that have been wiped out. And there's still plenty of corridor left in Queensland.
There remains the problem of farmers who can't or don't want to afford a fence. It can be overcome in part by government money.
We would like to see some early announcements from government within the next few months. It's urgent that we get some fencing occurring in some hotspots.
Apart from a small grant for a study report, money so far from governments is as rare as rain out here.
What we're asking from them is peanuts. It's just a matter of putting a bit of wool back into the people. The money doesn't turn up. Those that can afford to fence will fence. Those that cannot afford to fence will just be decimated by wild dogs. This is a chance for the state and federal governments to partner with landholders in the agribusiness sector and make this work. It's not just the farmer that benefits, it's the whole of the nation's economy that benefits, and especially these small country towns.